Good morning, everyone. Let's wait 5 additional minutes so everybody can join us, please. And welcome to Adriana as well and to all. Thanks.
Good morning.
Good morning, Adriana. We will just start in a few minutes. Welcome.
Thank you. I am ready.
So again, good morning, everyone. This is our second week. Uh, we are more than 30 participants already online. So let me just welcome everybody. I don't know if Nandal or Jamel want to say something first, and then we'll move to our session agenda.
Hi, Fernando. I'm okay. Thank you very much for everyone for joining. Yeah, we can get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Fernando. Good morning, everyone. If I can ask all of you to please change your display names to your full name because we're recording attendance. And so we need to make sure that all participants are recorded. So please change your display names to your full names. Thank you so much.
Great. Well, let me share my presentation. Can you see my screen, right? Well, today is our second week, our second session, actually. On our climate finance, we are promoting climate finance to increase resilience in the agricultural sector. And this is a virtual session of the e-learning course. You can see there our website here, and we were just checking and we saw that many have already logged in and have done their pre-course survey, baseline survey. So in this second week, we have this session agenda. Basically, we will start with an video and as an introduction. As we told you before, we have many videos in our Moodle platform. And today we want to show you one of them, a very short one to start with. And then we will pass to Adriana, our guest speaker from Ruta del Clima, Costa Rica. And then we're going to discuss a little bit how everybody is progressing in the module during this last week and what we suggest for the next 2 weeks. So let me just move to the video. Just a second, we'll show you that. Here we go. Are you able to watch and hear the video? Let me just start again.
No, we don't hear the video. Did you share with audio?
Yes, Jamel, I'm sharing. Perhaps, well, this is actually what we would like you to see during your week time. But just let me show you them if you cannot hear. You can at least watch the video, right?
Yes.
Okay, the audio is not going through, so that's not a problem. Let's do this. Let me show you where the video is in the platform so you can watch the videos during the week, and then we move to our guest speaker. Here you have the module platform, the module 2. So here you have 3 videos in that you can watch. We wanted to show you, this is a very short introduction, but we can skip that if we don't hear the audio at this moment. So we want everybody to be able to watch all the videos in each module. And we have seen that many of you have taken the pre-course baseline survey. We also have seen that a few have already taken the first quiz of Module 1, and there is a champion that took already the quiz of Module 2. This is what we want to encourage during this week and next week, which are key for you, is basically to watch all the videos and do this. The quizzes are very short and basically are based on the videos, but are not very difficult. So, and also, I like to point it out that we have optional readings, some suggested readings, and optional ones as well, and some exercises that are optional, are not graded during the course, but are very helpful to go through. So at the very least, I kindly suggest everyone to look at the exercise. So having said that, let me just move to present our guest speaker, which we are very, very excited to have today. Let me to have her today. So this is our session. We're gonna have the short introduction about the course and showing you the videos, where to find the videos actually. Today we have Adriana Vasquez, whom is the Director of Operations of Ruta del Clima. And then we're gonna have a few questions and closing. So I just show you the videos, and let me introduce Adriana. Adriana Vasquez is an economist from the National University and has an MBA with emphasis in social management. She's a director of programs at La Ruta del Clima. She has 12 years of experience working in rural, vulnerable, and poor communities, as well as accompanying capacity development processes. She was responsible for leading the development of the National Action Strategy for Climate Empowerment of Costa Rica and Panama, as well as different field investigations on loss and damage in communities in Central America and Costa Rica. Also, let me just say that Ruta del Clima is an NGO that promotes public participation in climate and environmental decision-making through education, awareness raising, training, and communication on climate change in Latin America. So welcome, Adriana, and let me just stop sharing so you can move forward with your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Fernando. It's very nice to be here. I'm sorry about my voice. I'm kind of sick, but it's okay. So I'm going to share my screen. I have a presentation, and just give me 1 second. And if you have any question, we can have it at the end. So I'm going to start presentation. Today, I have the opportunity to speak with all of you about a little about the topics that we manage at La Ruta del Clima. As Fernando was saying, we are an NGO based in Costa Rica, and we follow up the different conversations on the governance of climate change. Especially, we participate in the UNFCCC spaces. And well, today I'm going to share a little about the experience that we have and the knowledge that we have. So First of all, the learning objectives of the session of today is to understand the global climate governance landscape, including the UNFCCC and Paris Agreement, identify policy instruments and reporting mechanisms under the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement, and analyze the role of climate finance in negotiations and implications for the region. And in this part, I'm going to focus especially on NCQG and the Loss and Damage Fund. So I'm going to start with the UNFCCC. For those that don't know, the UNFCCC is born on the Rio Convention and opened the signature of the Earth Summit in Rio in 1992. And also it has other two conventions that emerged from the Rio that are the United Nations Convention of Biological Diversity and the Convention to Combat Desertification. These three are very linked and is where the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change was born. And on March 21 from 1994 is where it started being known as the UNFCCC. That is where it started all the process on climate change. Today, it has almost a universal membership. I think it's around 194 states that are parts of this convention. And every year in November, actually this year is going to start next week, all the parties or the countries that are represented meet in different countries to start discussing or continue the discussions around climate change and how to address climate change. It's a very political space where the different countries or parties bring their positions and their needs. And it's also a space where you can find not only representatives of the parties, but also you can find civil society, and you can find a private sector, and everyone is there trying to push for different topics on the agenda. Sorry. What's the impact of the negotiations on the developing countries today? Well, there are different topics. There's the climate finance, that is the international commitments that wants to mobilize around 100 billion annually by 2025. Actually, this year was presented the result of this commitment. And that's why it says that the target is currently being revised, because there are different positions that actually this goal of 100 billion is not reached. There are different countries that says that they even have put more money than 100 billions, but actually there are different reports that are putting in evidence that these 100 billions is most of it as debt and not grants. So it's putting the countries, instead of in a good position, in a position of dependence. So this 100 billions is is a big discussion right now about this international commitment. And actually the 100 billions was focused only on adaptation and mitigation. So that's also important, because right now, and we are going to speak about this after, they want to put a higher goal on finance, but also include loss and damage. Also, there is adaptation and resilience, that is to focus on increasing the adaptive capacity of the vulnerable countries in the face of extreme climate events, with technical assistance and technology transferation. And also there's also the discussion around loss and damage that maybe you have heard, in the recent years. There was an advancement on this topic with the establishment of the Loss and Damage Response Fund, that wants to provide compensation and assistance to the countries most affected by climate change, with grants. But right now, the fund for loss and damage doesn't have money. It has a pledge of 700 millions, if I'm not wrong. But actually, there's not clarity on how that money can be, can the countries get to that money, and there's no a lot of information. There are actually like defining the mechanism to get to the money. And also one of the topics that is always discussed is the mitigations, goals on mitigation. So one of the most important agreement that has like the best results in the UNFCCC is the Paris Agreement that was adopted on December 12, 2015, and is an international treaty that aims to address climate change and its different impacts, and it represents a collective effort by nearly all countries to combat climate change and limits the impacts and fostering global cooperation and commitment. The objective of the Paris Agreement is to limit the global warming below 2 Celsius degrees and above pre-industrial levels, and to pursue efforts to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees. This 1.5 degrees is like the recommendation from the scientists that if we pass that 1.5 degrees, the conditions to live on Earth are going to be like very difficult. But actually to get to the 1.5 degrees is not the best scenario. So right now, the Paris Agreement, I feel is not getting to its objective because a lot of the discussions continue, and there are not really strong efforts to phase out the fossil fuels use and other things that are necessary to not pass this limit of 1.5 degrees. Also, the Paris Agreement aimed to enhance the ability of countries to adapt to the impacts of climate change and to promote sustainable development. Some of the key components of the agreement is, well, as I was saying, the temperature goals, right, to limit the global warming. Also, the national determined contributions, that NDCs, that countries are required to submit their plans for reducing greenhouse gas emission. That is more mitigation, on the way of mitigation. And the NDCs have to be updated every 5 years to reflect the highest level of ambition. So right now, then we are in the second report of the NDCs. Then we have the global stocktake, that is an agreement that includes a mechanism for the global stocktake. And every 5 years, it has also to be assessed the progress through achievement of the temperature goal. And also on adaptation, the focus is to emphasize on the importance of adaptation to the impacts of climate change, enhancing resilience and reducing vulnerability, particularly for developing countries. On the adaptation side, there's a lot of discussion because for a lot of years, the discussion was about what is adaptation and all the discussion around this topic. But right now, they are trying to define like the how to monitor and evaluate the advances on adaptation. So the discussion is moving forward. Also, we have climate finance that is for developed countries to provide financial support to developing nations to help them to mitigate and adapt to climate change. And it was the goal that we can see here of 100 billions by 2020. Also, we have transparency and accountability. This agreement wants to establish a framework for transparency to ensure that the countries report on their emissions and the progress toward their commitments. And also we have the long-term goals that aim to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emission in the second half of the century, and encouraging countries to move towards sustainable development and low carbon economy. But all these topics are always like affected by the political context of the different countries. So when there's a war, like right now in Ukraine or in Gaza, it affects also the achievements of these commitments because the countries have different priorities. Also, when we have a context where we are changing on governments, especially the ones that have more power, it also affects the results of the negotiations. And that's why it's a very political space, but also is a space where, as when the Paris Agreement, if we have like the commitment of the different parts, we can get to different results. About the financial mechanisms under UNFCCC, there are different ones. I'm going to speak about these four, especially the Green Climate Fund, the GCF. It was established in 2010 during COP16 in Cancun, Mexico. And this Green Climate Fund is an option for the countries, usually under the form of grants, so they can develop different activities. Also, we have the Adaptation Fund that was created at COP7 in Morocco. And this fund is primarily financed by the revenues of the Clean Development Mechanism and projects under the Kyoto Protocol. Also, we have the Global Environment Facility, the GEF, that was designated as an operational financial mechanism on 1994. And the GEF also have different ways of funding that maybe they can be combined as grants and also as loans. And it's also an option to develop projects, especially for the countries in development for adaptation and mitigation. And the most recent one is the Loss and Damage Response Fund that was approved at COP27 in 2022. As part of the UNFCCC, but right now I think it's important to show that this fund is on the process of being developed, like the different mechanism to get to the money, and is for addressing loss and damage in the developing countries. So I'm going to stop here a minute to explain what is loss and damage, right? When we speak about loss and damage is when the countries don't have the capacity to adapt to climate change, right? Are the impacts of the climate change. So we can see loss and damage in the agricultural sector, for example, when we visit the countries of Central America, and the agriculture people says that they cannot produce anymore beans or different products because the land is too dry, or because the variability of the rain is very different than it was before. So they lost their basic production. So Loss and Damage Response Fund, what wants is to give the means to the people to make change or to respond to all the impacts that it has. Because if a small producer don't have the basic food for alimentation, so we have different effects as malnutrition, we have migration, we have the loss of their activities, production activities, so they don't have money to all the things that they need, right? Also, the Loss and Damage Fund is created or has the objective to address also non-economic losses and damages. There are the ones that is more difficult to put a number on them, right? But as I said before, it's still some discussion, and it only has like 700 millions. And right now it will be administered by the global, the Banco Mundial, the World Bank. So it's also something important because a lot of the discussion is how is the money of the loss and damage response fund be give to the countries, if it's going to be under the structure of loans or if it's going to be give under the structure of grants, because all the discussion around justice on this topic is if the countries get to this money under the way of loans, that means that they still paying for the losses and damage that they haven't caused. So that's why the loss and damage response fund has a lot of discussion around justice and also about responsibility, right? Because on the discussion on the UNFCCC is always related about differentiated responsibilities, because it's not the same responsibility of a country as Costa Rica that has 0.01% of emissions through a country as the US that has most emissions in the world. So we don't have the same responsibility, and the countries that have caused the climate change have to be more responsible to respond to the loss and damages, and also to give money for adaptation, for mitigation. So that's part of the discussion on these different spaces. Then there's a new topic that is the NCQG. That's part of the financing mechanism. The NCQG is a development objective that seeks to replace the previous commitment of 100 billion annually by 2025. And it's still under discussion. Actually, this COP that is going to happen next week in Azerbaijan, all the discussion are more focused on the NCQG. Why? Because they want to have a higher goal of finance, but a lot of countries of the global north are more focused on to see who is going to put the money, and the countries of global south are more focused on how much money they have to put. So it's a huge discussion that is happening right now. And there's an urgent need of high quality climate finance in the form of non-repayable funds. And I'm going to stop here a minute also, because this goal of 100 billions, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, in the different analyses that the countries have done for the discussion of the NCQG, they have realized that a big percentage of the 100 billions was under the form of loans. So that means that the countries in development have to receive the money, but they are paying that money back. So if these are resources for adaptation and for mitigation, it shouldn't be under the form of loans. It should be under the form of grants. So that way the countries can really invest and not get in a cycle of indebtedness and more vulnerability. Also, there is the need to align financing with the priorities demonstrated by the countries in the NDC processes and national adaptation plans. The inclusion of thematic sub-targets when establishing the NCQG to address the current imbalance of climate finance allocated for mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage. And I'm going to stop here too, because a lot of the grants were more for mitigation than for adaptation. And the countries in development, what they are saying is that actually they don't have a lot to mitigate. They need more resources to adapt. And also they need resources to adapt because they are already facing a lot of impacts of climate change. And also there's the discussion about a third sub item that is loss and damage response. So there's also a discussion about if it's going to be additional to the loss and damage fund, or is going to be the same money that the loss and damage fund, but the countries in development are pushing is that it has to be additional to the loss and damage fund. And finally, it's necessary to clarify from the outset what should and should not be considered climate finance, with the proposal regarding financing being a new and additional. And about this, also, it's very interesting because in the report of this 100 billion, there was identified that a lot of the funding was not only loans, but also was from the private sector in activities that are considered greenwashing. So there's also a discussion about what is going to be considered climate finance, especially in the reporting process, to be sure that the money that is arriving is additional and is not things that already the companies have to do and the countries have to do. Some of the key milestones related to agricultural and climate finance under the UNFCCC are the Coronivia Work Program on Agriculture, the Climate Finance for Agriculture and Adaptation of COP26, the GCF, the Green Climate Fund, and the update of the NDCs for agriculture. There are important also to have in mind for your context. And about the loss and damage in agriculture, it's important, as I said before, right, that there are important effects on the production, on the livelihoods of rural communities, and some of the impacts are the loss of crops, soil degradation, increase in pests and diseases, also the loss of agricultural biodiversity, and the loss of agricultural knowledge, like ancestral knowledge, impacts on the food security, migration, and rural displacement. There are some of the damages and losses that is important to start addressing with adaptation measures, and also through financing and resilience to address these challenges of climate change. And usually in the discussion in the political sphere is these impacts are forgotten or even are not like valued as important as they are. So I think it's important to, from the civil society sector, from the institutional sector, to always being pushing to put this topic on the table, especially in communities that right now are suffering a lot of food insecurity and malnutrition. And about the loss and damage responding fund, as I was explaining before, it was established on November 2022 at Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. And it began with the agreement to provide funding for loss and damage to vulnerable countries. It was under Decision 2 CMA4. And in COP28 last year, it adopts the structure of the loss and damage fund and the financing arrangements. It was established a transition committee that has different meetings during the year, and that started to define like the different mechanisms, and they agreed during this year that the fund will be under the World Bank. So now the discussion is more about if it is going to be a fund that will have a focus on justice and that will actually respond to the needs of the communities. Currently, there's no binding mechanism has been established to ensure regular contributions. And here it's important also to make reference to the Paris Agreement that has a paragraph, that is the paragraph 51 in the Paris Agreement, that establish that the countries that are more responsible of climate change don't have legal responsibility to address climate change. And what does it mean? What means that? Well, the thing is that if they don't have legal responsibility, that means that their contribution are voluntary. And that's why right now the Loss and Damage Fund doesn't have funding. Because the contribution to the Loss and Damage Fund is voluntary. And if a country don't want to put money on it, it doesn't have to do it. That's why it says here, like the fund's reliance on voluntary contribution from developed countries is concerning and jeopardize the long-term sustainability of the fund. And it's unclear whether this form of financing is an effective and realistic way to support the needs of loss and damage response. Because every day we have more impacts and more losses and damages. And right now, even if the fund is established, the money is not going to repair or address the loss and damage that we have already lived. It's going to give money only for the things that will happen in the future. So that's also something that we have to understand, that already the communities that are losing their land because of the increase of the sea, or the communities that have lost all their knowledge, agricultural knowledge, because of the changes in their weather and practices, are not going to be compensated and won't have an answer from the countries that have caused the climate change. What is the importance of the Loss and Damage Responding Fund? Well, this fund is essential to protect farmers and mitigate the economic and social losses that climate change imposes to the agricultural sector. Also, it can help to rapid recovery, that it can provide funds to restore the crops and repair agricultural infrastructure affected by disasters, accelerating local economic recovery. Also, it can be a protection for the livelihood of the agricultural sector, supporting farmers who relied on the land for subsistence and ensuring recovery for safeguards and economic and job security. Also, it can be a resilience strengthening, encouraging resilient agricultural practices. Also, about the food security, it can help to stabilize agricultural production after climate events. And also, it can be target funding for irreparable losses and provide specific funds to cover irreversible damages, such the loss of agricultural biodiversity and soil degradation. But the fund right now doesn't have funding. So I think it's also important. That is why it's important to follow up the discussion and to see what are the agreements that are that are ay, se me fue la palabra en inglés, the agreements that are reached in the COP and in the different spaces of discussion. And I think that's it from my side. I hope if you have any question that I can help you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adriana. So now we have our questions and answers session. Please go ahead and ask your questions. Well, it was definitely a fantastic presentation, Adriana. And as Jamel is saying in the chat room, just feel free to unmute and ask directly your question on raise your hand. Okay, we see that last time Iwan was asking a few questions, was very active, Igel as well. Adriana, what your presentation was very, very interesting. Oh, I see one hand up. Please go ahead, unmute yourself and ask your question, Mire. Dear Dick, if you can, Korn. There is a one hand. You can write your question in the chat room or just move on to unmute and ask your question. Well, Adriana, as I was mentioning that your presentation was very interesting. We have all these international funds, and you gave us a lot of information about the loss and damage fund that is being discussed at this moment to fund it, actually. And you also mentioned that most of the $100 billion goal actually was in the form of debt. So basically, if you can elaborate a little bit more on how Costa Rica is moving forward with those targets in terms of loss and damage.
Okay, about loss and damage, Costa Rica has a very interesting position. I think, particularly when it was on the negotiation of the loss and damage fund, what the government said that their only objective was the fund to be established, and they didn't speak about a target. They didn't speak about the form of these of the funding so I think it's important also under this COP for the Costa Ricans to follow up the government and see what's going to be their position. Usually Costa Rica is aligned with ILAC, that is one of the negotiation groups for the region of Latin America. And ILAC right now, especially on the NCQG, has the position about defining and clarifying what is climate finance, and also to push for a higher goal above 100 billions. I think they're speaking about 1.5 trillions, if I'm not wrong about the number. And about the loss and damage, they haven't said a lot. Mostly what they're referring is that the fund need funding. So we are going to continue the discussion and see what results we have after this COP. I'm seeing in the chat that there are some questions about the question of Vairag. There are different mechanisms under the UNFCCC, and there are different investment criteria to be fulfilled when preparing proposal for this funding. Yes, like every one of the different forms of funding, GCF, GIF, everyone has different criterias, and also to get to this funding, you have to have different characteristics. So that's why there's a lot of discussion about who gets the funding and if it's easy to access to the communities. Because right now, if you want to get to one of these funding, usually that depends on the mechanism that you are going to use, but you have to have some characteristics, some level of management of resources, and most of the time is the government who can apply to the funding, and the organizations that are applying, like the civil society organization, has to be very big and have some administrative characteristics to get to the funding. So part of the discussion of the loss and damage fund is how they are going to ensure that the communities that are the ones who really needs the resources are going to get to the money. Then the question of Ewan, how do we see the Sharm el-Sheikh joint work on agriculture in the context of climate mechanism instruments and the okay, about the Sharm el-Sheikh joint work on agriculture, just give me 1 second, I have answer here. Okay, so I have it. About this key milestone related to agriculture, so we have the joint program of Coronivia from agriculture that was established on 2017, and it recognized agriculture as a sector that is essential to the fight of climate change. And this program aims to ameliorate the adaptation, the resilience, and reduce emissions of the agricultural sector through the exchange of knowledge, innovation, and sustainable practices. Then we have the climate finance for agriculture adaptation, where it was established with the necessity to increase the financing for agriculture, especially in the sectors more vulnerable as in the countries in development. And there are like different compromises, like financial compromises, specific for the countries and international entities to support the adaptation of the agricultural sector. Then the GCF, it's an instrument that is essential to finance mitigation and adaptation, and it supports the agricultural sector with initiatives to reduce the vulnerability and improve the food security through sustainable and resilient practices. These are like some of the mechanisms in agriculture. And let me see if I have something else. Yeah, I think that's the information that I have on these questions. I don't know if there's another. I just want to put them into the context of the quotation.
Well, as we wait for another question, Adriana, your presentation was really up to date. You were actually mentioning that what is going to be discussed next week and what has been discussed over the weeks in preparation for next week. It is very interesting to see this discussion and how you were describing that mostly is going in the form of debt, and there are some countries that cannot really react very quickly to the adaptation challenges, like you were mentioning in Central America. Those were very, very enlightening. Nelanie has a question. Please, Nelanie, go ahead.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Adriana, for a wonderful presentation. I have a very just a clarification here. In when you were talking about the loss and damage fund, um, and you mentioned that the developed countries, their contributions, they're voluntary. And I remember last week the presentation that we had, the speaker noted that for the NCQG, that the UK is the only nation essentially indicating that it should solely be for developing countries. I was just curious if the loss and damage fund, if that is also only for developing countries, and maybe that's the reason why the developed countries, maybe the contribution is voluntary, or just for clarification, or would they also be eligible to utilize funding from the loss and damage fund?
Okay, that's a very good question, Melanie. Thank you. Okay, the loss and damage fund was created. It has a very long history, right? It was pushed by the seats that are the small islands states 30 years ago. They started pushing to create a fund so they can receive an answer for the losses and damage that they were already living because of the increase of the sea. They were seeing their territory being affected and disappearing. So when the fund was created, and the discussion around the fund was around creating resources for the countries to address losses and damages, particularly the countries more affected by climate change. So it has always been the discussion around responsibilities, because what the countries are saying is that the fund should be for the countries that are not most responsible for climate change, and that the funding should be put by the countries that are more responsible for climate change. So actually, in theory, the fund will be for the most vulnerable countries that are already living the impacts of climate change. But as you saw last week, in Spain, there was a huge storm, and there was a lot of communities affected. So I think now the question is if that fund is going to be accessible for other countries. In theory, no, but it's still some discussion. And the thing is that, as the paragraph 51 says, that there is not a legal compromise, countries are not obligated to give funding for addressing losses and damages. So, and they cannot, like from Costa Rica, I cannot put a like a legal case to the US because of the losses and damages that we are living. So there's not a legal commitment. And that's why the countries don't want to put money, because what they are realizing is that the funding for loss and damage is going to be even higher than the funding for NCQG, or for adaptation, for mitigation, because there's constantly losses and damages. So that's part of the discussion, because in theory it's only for the countries more affected and more vulnerable and that are less responsible of climate change. And that's why they don't want to put the money. And that's why it has took almost 30 years to get to an agreement of the creation of the loss and damage fund, because no one wants to be responsible of putting the money. Also in the NCQG, that is one of the discussion that is right now, there's a part of the discussion is around of the contribution. Who are the countries that are going to be putting the money for the NCQG? Because the most developed countries are saying that the contribution base should be amplified, and that other countries as China and India that are like growing faster should also put money on the NCQG. But it's always a political discussion, and that's why you have to be following up to understand a little the positions of the countries in the different spaces. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you so much, Adriana.
You're welcome.
Well, Adriana, we want to thank you for your presentations and answers. Just want to mention to everybody here that you are very welcome to contact Adriana afterwards, because she was very kind to be part of this session today. And of course, we are, at this moment, focusing on Suriname and Guyana, but Adriana has a lot of expertise from many places in Latin America. So that's what we want to do as well, to get to know other countries' experiences, and also this global discussion about the funding through this international finance mechanism. I just want to mention as well that this coming Friday, we are going to have a presentation that is more from the local, from the national side, from the national development of financial mechanisms side, which is a little bit different from this international mechanism. So let me just move to share my last slide to point it out. What are we gonna do next week? Oh, this coming Friday, actually. Sorry, this is the slide. So basically, just want to remind you about the virtual activity. We have some champions among you that already took the module 2 quiz, but we want to encourage you to watch the videos in our e-learning course platform, to watch the videos, to take the pre-course baseline survey. Many of you have done that, and complete the quizzes, please, during this and next week. Try to do it at your best time before November 15th. And we're going to see you again this coming Friday for the synchronic session of week 3, and on Monday, the last one. As you see, as I mentioned, this Friday, we're going to discuss the financial mechanisms more from the national perspective, national financial instruments, trying to develop those instruments. And the last session is going to be about developing more green projects, and basically we're going to finalize the course. So again, please try to watch the videos, and these are the key dates. That's basically what we have for today. I like to thank everybody, the particular Adriana, and Silvana is traveling to the negotiations at this moment, so that she might be flying at this moment. That's why she's not with us today, but hopefully we'll be able to be on Friday or Monday as we move to these negotiations next week. So thank you very much to everybody. I saw some activities this week, and I encourage you again to do as much as you can, and feel free to email. We just received a couple of emails about registrations. We just solved one just this morning. So if you are finding difficulties with the platform, please let us know. Write me an email, or to Silvana, or through Jamel and Nando. We're gonna solve it, and let us know. Please, we're gonna help you, and enjoy the videos and the course. Thank you very much, and see you next Friday, this coming Friday. See you all. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Adriana.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, bye.
Bye-bye.